And we are live with Jake Robinson today. We are recording a guest interview live. Sometimes we do these live, sometimes the time doesn't work out. So this will also come out as an audio podcast in the future. Of course, we did not announce this was coming, so we'll see whoever shows up, guys. When you see this, definitely share this on social that we're live. I know Jake put a link out as well. We're here to talk about a topic that I'm super excited about. Freeze drying techniques, hacks, and developing peace of mind with deep preps. Jake is the person I've learned a lot on freeze drying about. When I first got my freeze dryer, he was kind enough to say, "Hey, Nicole, just give me a call." He talked to me for an hour, giving me different tips, groups I could join, all of these, like the getting started. I don't know, orientation is probably a good way to say it. And that really helped me not make a lot of stupid mistakes with my harvest, right? I mean, not that it would have been irreversible, but shortcutting things, like I didn't realize you could filter and reuse the oil, which you can, but we'll get into all of that as part of the the interview we get into. Before we do that though, Jake, tell us a little bit about who's Jake Robinson and what brought you to this podcast.
It's always hard to figure out what to say. It's like when somebody says, "Where are you from?" Where I live now, where did I live the longest, where was I born, how long did I, and so it's hard for me to go back in time. I'm just going to probably encapsulate it and say, from a career standpoint, I've been in sales and marketing most of my life, self-employed. I can never have a boss. You know how I am about asking questions and being ornery already. I mean, I've been fired by a couple of bosses in the past, and
Not
I was
you.
never. Yeah, a guy actually recruited me to a sales job, and then uh, it was a high pressure, one of these timeshare kind of thing deals with a big catalog. It was a ripoff, really. I didn't know it until I got there for a while. And after about the third day, he had this sales meeting, and he said, "Jake, put your feet up on the table." I said, "Do what?" "Show me your shoe." And so he wanted me to do that, so I did that. He goes, "This is what you don't wear to this outfit. That's not the proper shoes to wear." Now, you know me, I didn't like that at all. I bit my tongue until afterwards, and then I laid into that guy and told him
Them's
where he
fighting
put it.
words.
Those are fighting words. I don't. Nobody's going to tell you. You want to get on to me about shoes? Do it in private. And so I don't like bosses, and I guess that makes for a good anarchist, if you will, because I would like to volunteer to work with people. But anyway, I moved to England for 3 years uh, with financial services and started a company over there. Well, actually brought our company over there. There was about 30 couples that went over there. We were all independent contractors. We went in. We lived there for about 3 years, and I got a really good taste of cradle to grave nanny state. What it was like for everybody in politics to be super on the progressive side, and I mean the Tories are supposed to be like the Republicans over there. They didn't say they weren't going to raise your taxes. They just said we weren't going to raise your taxes as much as those guys are. And I came back and I got involved in politics because I thought I don't want the U.S. to go the way England's going. And so I did. I got involved in politics, and I felt like something was going on. Keep in mind, I was over there between 2003 and 2007. I wasn't paying attention to what was going on. I didn't hear Jack saying in 2008, "Get out of the market, get out of the market." I didn't know about that because I wasn't tuned in to what was going on in the States. I came back when we had that big crash. And so it was doom and gloom. And I'm like, man, the end of the world's here. And I feel like I'm way behind. And I don't know. I just probably did some searching around and I came across Jack's podcast. And I listened to it sporadically. But I determined that I had to start trying to figure out stuff. So I became a beekeeper and I started canning food. And, I grew up around my parents. My mom always canned food and sewed and all kind of stuff. And my dad had a garden and we chopped wood, so it was kind of like we had our own little mini homestead going on there. And I found, I went and met Jack he went to one of these expo where he was touring around, and I went to the expo and met him at a bar afterwards. And I remember thinking back now, I know I talked to him about the Republican Party and what was going on in politics. And I know he had to be sitting there drinking and sipping his beer, thinking, "What a freaking idiot!" This guy, he listens to me, and he's all into the the dichotomy, and I was stuck in that system.
Well, I got to hand it to you because you have single-handedly changed Jack's mind about Harvest Right freeze dryers. He originally thought they were a huge waste of money, and it was like you took that as a personal challenge to show him that you could monetize freeze drying or at least make it worth your while. And he's not wrong. It's not right for everybody. But I think a lot of you got it, and you had that thing going 24/7. You had deals with farmers to take their surplus in exchange for trading some of it back freeze dried. And I think you are instrumental in changing his mind on this topic.
Well, yeah, I do remember him dismissing it out of hand on one of his shows, and I sent him. I'm sure I sent him an email saying, "No, you're wrong. Here's why." But it's kind of like what Sean Mills does. Sean talks about how you can't get a payback in solar, and then it's not worth it. And he's like, "Well, wait a minute. How much does it cost if you can't get electricity at all? What does that cost you? Or how much does it cost if you can buy a piece of land that's off grid and it's so less expensive than what you would have bought, and you're already ahead if you put your solar in, and the whole cost is less than what you would have paid for this grid tied property." And that's the way I think you can look at freeze drying, is that you can actually come out ahead. But I don't think that anybody that ever gets a freeze dryer in today's world, if you're thinking in terms of we got food shortages coming, the prices are spiking through the roof, you should be running that thing 24/7. And I did not run it 24/7 when I first bought it. And by the way, I bought it used. I had an alert set up on Craigslist, but this is back when you could do a recipe through ifthisthenThat.com, and it actually worked. You could go and put keywords in this recipe, and anytime that shows up on Craigslist, this app would send you an email saying, "Hey, Harvest Right freeze dryer just popped up." Well, I had that alert going for over a year and never got a hit on it. I thought nobody's ever going to sell their Harvest Right freeze dryer. But then one time, boom, an alert popped up, email. There's a Harvest Right freeze dryer for sale in Lewisburg. Got on the phone, called the lady. I was the first one to call. I said, "Tell me about it." "Well, we've not used it maybe a handful of times, and we just don't need it." And I said, it was $1,200. I said, "Well, I'm coming right now. I'm buying it." And she was going through a divorce, and evidently her husband must have been one of these, the preppers that they just find out about it, and they're going to go out and get all of the food, the seed bank and the solar. What's the thing that Jack doesn't like? A solar generator. It's not a solar generator. It's just a solar system. He had bought all of this stuff. It was all brand new. They had ran like 3 cycles through this medium freeze dryer. And so I toted that thing home, and I used it and messed around with it. And the first thing I learned was right off the bat, you can't use your freeze dryer unless you have some type of vacuum sealer. Because the first thing I did was do a thing of apple slices. I thought that'd be cool. So I did apple slices, and they came out great. I put them on the counter, and I was munching on them, and then I left. And I came back for about 45 minutes later, walking through the kitchen, grabbed another one. I thought I was biting into a marshmallow. I mean, it was like, what happened? It reabsorbed the moisture in the air. So you have to process your freeze-dried food immediately to get the best long-term storage. And so I didn't even have a vacuum sealer. I had to go buy one. And anyway, there's all these things I learned along the way on just how to use a freeze dryer. A lot of it was trial and error. But
it's funny. I don't vacuum seal in my jars all the time. If I'm going to use it off the countertop, I don't. If I'm going to use it in a month or two, I don't worry about it. But your Harvest Right is a vacuum sealer for jars, which is something it took me forever to figure out.
And you were really good at that. My phone's ringing. Let me turn it off. You're really good at that. In fact, when I heard you explain that, I'm like, I know what she's going to say. And then I thought, no, I don't either, because that's not what I thought it was. Because I had a hard time figuring out how do you unplug the tray and still make it work. So
okay,
you
well, we're
sort of
jumping around. We're getting to advanced
all
stuff
right.
here. Let's go back to the basics. How
All
did
right.
you determine that a freeze dryer was worth the investment for you?
Well, I wanted one bad. You know how you get that? You want a new.
You want a new toy?
You want a new truck, or you want it so bad, and then it's through emotion. You buy it, and then you back it up with logic.
Justify it?
You know, it's
Yeah, people buy on emotion and justify with facts. Totally,
exactly.
totally
And
agree.
so
Yeah.
I really wanted one, but I actually resisted for probably 2 years because I could not fathom paying $3,000 for this machine that you know I can make ice cream bars with, and I just resisted. And so that's when I put that alert out there. I thought, well, if I can ever find one used, I could justify it. And one come in, it was 1,200. I couldn't beat that. And then I figured that over a period of time, I would probably make my money back somehow. I didn't really know. I didn't have a plan. What's up, Patrick? And there's a shout out to Patrick. And so I started messing around with it, but it wasn't like I needed to freeze dry food. I would do it every now and then. What happened was when COVID hit and the shelves emptied in 2020, I got serious. And at that time, I actually had a second freeze dryer. I bought it off of Craigslist for $1,200. And my wife's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I can easily sell this, honey, and make 1,800 or probably." And but I never sold it. I just left it around, had it for a long time, probably a year. And of course, you know how wives are like, "You said you were going to sell it." And when the COVID hit, I was like, "Yeah, I need to start using this thing." I cranked it up 24/7. When the shelves cleared and I came in the supermarket and everything was gone, I said, I ain't having this. I need to be running that freeze dryer. So I did that. And then at the same time, I sold the other freeze dryer. I sold it for $2,300 to an herbalist down in Alabama. I probably could have sold that thing 50 more times. I still get requests for it on
Oh no, I reached
Facebook.
out to you once on Facebook. I'm like, "Do you really have one for sale?" When I was looking, and then I ended up buying a new one because the
Yeah,
used ones are almost retail. And at that point,
yeah,
I'd rather just have a new one and the year warranty and all of that. Um,
yeah.
so what
So,
about that made you figure out it was financially worth it though?
well, because how much is it worth to have food when you can't get it somewhere or you can't
Mhm.
afford it? And to me, I don't think anybody will ever regret spending, even if you spend $3,000 on a new one. If you use it and you do it 24, just keep it running and put food up. You're banking. It's kind of like Jack talks about, self-reliance is based on how much time you can go before you run out of resources. And freeze drying allows you to really push your food storage way out into the future. Because if you think about how the quality that freeze drying does as far as preserving nutrients, if you do pressure canning and you pressure can some tomatoes, you're going to lose about 45% of your nutrients. You're only going to keep about 65% of the nutrients that tomato had. If you're going to kill it with all the heat, and it doesn't last as long. How long will maybe 5 years? I mean, how long can you make? How long are you willing to pull a jar off the shelf? I actually do have some tomatoes that I pressure canned in 2011. They're not that tasty. I could still eat them. They just don't taste as great.
Yeah, I use mine up within 2 years if at all possible.
Yeah.
Like my big moment was I have 2 jars left from 2019 right now.
Okay.
And that's a success for me because the way I manage my pantry is to use things up. The funny thing with the freeze dryer is I'm not storing stuff for 20 years, Jake. I'm like eating that stuff. It's
Well,
on a cycle. So that my goal is not long-term storage with it, but some things are simply better freeze dried. But
well,
it's just
that
helping me get through the surplus.
that's a different approach, like you're saying. It's different, like for different strokes for different folks. As you're saying, Jack, it's not right for everybody. I want that food security, knowing that I can go 25 years. Not that I'm going to wait 25 years. I've eaten some of mine too. I mean, it's probably smart to do that because you need to know how to rehydrate your food and see if it tastes well and how you do it. I mean, there is some foods you don't want to rehydrate. You just want to eat it, freeze dried. I
Yeah.
thought one of the coolest things I've discovered is freeze dried okra raw tastes great. It's crunchy. I don't know. It's kind of weird. I would never eat raw okra right off the vine, but I'll eat freeze dried raw okra.
I'm totally trying that this year if I get any okra from my garden.
Yeah, just slice them up. But back to the nutrient thing. If you dehydrate, and a lot of people out there right now think we're talking about dehydration. They think we're talking about an Excalibur machine or some high price. No, this is freeze drying, not dehydrating. Dehydrating will retain about 75% of its nutrients, and it might last about the same time frame. But freeze dried food will retain 97% of the nutrients, so you don't lose almost anything, and it'll last way longer than any other food storage type of food storage. And so that's one of the things I really love about it. But when I started thinking about, I want long-term food storage, I just want to be able to know that in 3 years or 5 years, even 7 years or whatever, that the food is still good and I've got a good nutrient base and I've got caloric density based on the type of foods that I freeze dry. And I think one of the coolest exercises to do is think about the math behind freeze drying food. So I'm going to grab. By the way, I know I'm in a wheelchair, but it makes the best chair there is.
It's like, did you get surgery and not tell us?
No, I hijacked this from my mother-in-law. She doesn't use it, and it's just easier than the others. The thing that has like 6 legs and it scratches the floor. This is quiet. Anyway, that is a half-gallon mason jar, and that's approximately 7.5 pre-cooked pounds of ground beef. This probably weighs about 3 pounds, maybe, because after you freeze dry it, it's very lightweight. So what you're really doing, you're not dehydrating. Freeze drying, if you remember your 8th grade or 7th grade science class, it's sublimation. It's taking a solid and going straight to a gaseous state. It skips the liquid state. So if you take water, freeze it, you warm it up, it's going to melt into water, and then you keep warming it up, it's going to turn into vapor. Freeze drying goes from solid ice straight to vapor, and it skips that liquid phase, which keeps the food. It leaves the food in its same crystalline structure. It just takes all the moisture out, or most of the moisture out, and that's why it can last so long. And so now all you got to do to have the food back to where it was, just add the water back into it. And so does a great job on that. But if you think about it, you can do on a medium freeze dryer. Harvest Right recommends that you only put a maximum of 10 pounds of food in the freeze dryer. And because you're using, in a medium freeze dryer, you're using 4 of these trays, okay? And so when I have 4 trays and I take 10 pounds of hamburger meat and brown it in a skillet, and just get it brown enough for the pink to be gone. I don't want to overdo it because I'm probably going to rehydrate it and then cook something else with it, like chili or whatnot. And so I'll take a 10-pound tube of meat. I used to get this from when I first started doing this. I did a ton of it. I went to Sam's Wholesale. You get a tube of 80-20. You can't get 90-10. It's more expensive. But the only difference is there's just more fat in 80-20. But when you're freeze drying ground beef, some people will say you need to cook it and then you need to wash it with water and rinse the fat off. I think that's dumb. I don't wash it with water. What I do is I take the freshly cooked beef and put it in a sieve over a pot and let it drain. While it's draining, I'm cooking some more beef. I cook 10 pounds at a time, and then I let it drain as much as it possibly can. Then I dump it in another big pot. And then when I get ready to fill up my 4 trays, I lay paper towels into the tray and then fill each tray up. So each tray is going to have about 2.5 pounds if you're doing 10 pounds of beef. And so I'll run that cycle, and within about 24 hours, I've got freeze-dried ground beef, and most of the fat is out of it. Thanks, I appreciate that. And so when I take that ground beef out and put a little funnel on there and put it in there, I take a push rod and I kind of pack it as much as I can. I've got an oxygen absorber in the bottom this size, I have two of them generally in that size. I think these are 500 or 200. I can't remember which ones they're 200 cc's.
Mm-hmm.
You need to do your research and figure out how much volume of food you have to how much oxygen absorber. You may need 2 or 3 of them depending on what size you get. So here's the thing, though. Think about this. If I did about 450 pounds of ground beef through my freeze dryer. I just got on a beef mode, and I stayed on beef mode for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I finally got to the point where I think I got enough beef now. Then I started doing deli meat, and I bought this from Sam's Wholesale. This is the pack of deli meat, like honey ham or Black Forest ham that you can get in that little packet. It's about 22 ounces. It's really wet. You have to prep it. You have to dry it. So I have to lay it on paper towels and pat it all off. And then I roll it up into what I call little meat cigarettes. I roll it up really tight and I stack it in the tray.
Meat straws.
Meat straws. Okay, that's probably more PC. And so I did as tight as I can, and then I pack them in a tray. And so I fill up 4 trays. I go through probably 6 or 8 of those packs. I can't remember now. But when they come out, they're perfect size for a half-pint jar, and I can get about 12 to 14 of those meat straws in there, and those really easily rehydrate. If I pop this off, take a few of the meat cigarettes, put in a bowl, put some water in it, and about 3 minutes later, you can't even tell the difference than the day you took it out of the package. And so, but think about this. If I did 450 pounds of ground beef, when you make a meal with ground beef, what does it call for? Like a chili
1 pound.
recipe. 1 pound. Spaghetti recipe, tacos, sloppy joes, whatever it might be, always costs for 1 pound of ground beef. So technically I can make a meal every day for 450 days. That's a year and a half maybe. But are you going to eat beef every single day? Well, maybe. But are you going to eat a ground beef every single day? Maybe. I don't know. I probably wouldn't eat it every single day. It'll probably last me 2 years is what I'm thinking. But you think about this, if it takes 24 hours to make 10 pounds of ground beef, that's 10 days worth of eating that I made in 24 hours. So every 24-hour cycle, I've got 10 more days of meals, a hearty meal that could add other things too.
Yeah, so, and those meat straws are one of the things I'm bringing on my road. I leave tomorrow, in case you don't know, to go to Texas for Exit and Build Land Summit. And then I'm taking a few days of vacation, and then I'm coming home. And this time, I usually bring a plug-in freezer because I'm a ketogenic eater. This time, I ran the freeze dryer starting about a week ago, and I freeze-dried sliced cheese because I like it better than cubes for road food. I made meat straws, and they're good, crunchy, like they're meat chips. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'll just get them straight out of the jar, and then I freeze dried some just meals that I can just add water to, and those meals I've put in Mylar bags so I can just add water to the bag and eat it out of the bag like a
stew or something, or what?
Yeah, so it's all. What I did is I have leftover workshop food because my spring workshop was a week ago, and we had some smoked chicken left. I made a variety of different kinds of stew-like things. I made Tuscan chicken, which has got a creamy tomato sauce. I made a creamy chicken stew, and I just froze them in individual portions rather than on the trays, and then ice cubed them out basically from these Tupperware onto the trays. So I have them segmented by serving size.
Oh.
So I don't have to figure it out, right? Because you can freeze it on the whole tray, and then you have to divide it up. I didn't want guesswork, so I just did it that way. And it's funny because what got me to buy a freeze dryer was buying a half-gallon jar from you on a barter blanket of freeze-dried ground beef right before I went for a hike. And I brought that beef, and I brought some instant mashed potatoes from the store, and I brought some bouillon, like dried bouillon tablets, and that's what I ate. And I had some other things, but that was basically what I ate for 3 days. It was tasty. It was easy to rehydrate. And I realized that it was superior to anything else I could get. I could do the Mountain House meals or whatever, and those are really good. But I could flavor it with anything I wanted to. And I was like, I can make anything I want for hiking with this thing. And yes, it's a lot of money to buy the upfront thing. And, not everybody's in a position to do that. But I went in with somebody else. We have a community here so we can all use it. And that made a big difference for me. It was just like the quality of the meal of that beef versus what I would get normally for hiking was amazing.
And that's also one of our success stories too. Is Dixie. Um, okay, my mind just went blank. Our
Dixie
hiking
Mills.
lady. Yeah,
Yeah.
she picked up some of my freeze dried powdered milk, the raw milk that I get from the Mennonite farm,
Yeah.
and she said it was awesome because she took that milk and took some cocoa powder and mixed it together and made her own instant hot chocolate mix with milk instead of with water. And she did say the trick though is when you're rehydrating milk, you got to use cold water. You don't want to use hot
Yeah. Use
water.
cold water. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of tricks to learning how to work with it. But the key is that it's lightweight when you're packing that stuff on a trail. This stuff is much lighter than if you had a full blown, with all the water in it. I mean, I make 20-minute chili with the ground beef. I'll take a pressure canner and throw in all of my stuff for a chili without the meat, and throw that in there and pressure can it for like 7 to 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, and then open it up, dump in a pound of freeze-dried beef, cover it back over, cook it for 5 more minutes, and it reabsorbs all the juices. Instant chili. I can have chili in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, you don't have to do a thickener.
Yeah.
Because that's the other, what I figured out is I can tell the farmers at the farmer's market, hey, when your zucchini get too big, I'll buy them. Just bring them. And they don't even charge me money. They just give them to me because they're going to throw them to their cows or whatever, or in the compost. And I spiralize those and then I freeze dry them. And that makes zoodles. But if you like crumble those up, you end up with a flour made out of zucchini. That's one of the best soup thickeners I've used. That's, since I've stopped using flour so much in my cooking. It's great. It's just straight out of the bag. Boom, done. Soup is thick.
There's a guy on YouTube that has a channel that he sells freeze-dried foods, but he also says, "Will this freeze dry?" I can't remember his name. It's a weird name. You can find out. I'm sure if you just go into YouTube and say, "Will this freeze dry?" He'll pop up.
No, I'll try that.
Yeah, he actually he experiments with everything, like condiments. Well, what about mustard? Will that freeze dry? I mean, he tries everything under the sun.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff you never think about. So he tried. He had these big gigantic pickles in the big jars. He freeze dried those, and he has his employees that work. He's got like 12 employees that work in his business, and they'll filter through the warehouse, and he'll say, "Here, I need you to test this," and they'll test out his food, and they'll give a thumbs up or thumbs down. Nobody liked the pickles. They hated them. He hated them. But then he decided to take the freeze dried pickles and make pickle powder and put it in a blender and made pickle powder. And then he put the pickle powder on other stuff, and he said, "Oh my gosh, this is the most awesome thing ever." Do you know the secret of why there's lines backed up around Chick-fil-A restaurants? They marinate their chicken in pickle juice.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I can't eat their food, so.
Well,
they also fry it in soy oil, which will rip Nicole's sauce up.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that, but I know that people will stand in line. I don't know if you've ever seen the double lines, cars out the. It's crazy. I don't know why anybody would do that, but their sandwiches do taste good. So I got to thinking, well, if that pickle juice is the secret weapon, I mean, I'm going to do a bunch of pickles and make pickle powder and use that as a spice. I mean, I did the last Jack's workshop. I made homemade MSG powder, and this comes from Google Foods and sous vide everything. He made some MSG powder, and he used dehydrated ingredients like mushrooms and garlic and cheese, Parmesan cheese, and all the sardines and all of these foods, tomatoes. All of these foods have natural MSG in the food. So it's not a chemical process. It doesn't look like the MSG you see in the spice bottle. It's white. Doesn't even look real. And it made his steaks taste freaking awesome. So I made it using a freeze dryer instead of the dehydrator, and I did a whole cycle of each individual, and I made a bunch of it. And I don't know if people liked it or not, but I did barter every bit of it out. I only had maybe one jar left for myself. But you can make all kinds of spices with freeze. I gotta do tomatoes, and I'll do tomatoes two different ways. I'll cut them a 1/4 inch thick, big beefsteak tomatoes, and I'll put them in a salad spinner and spin them up pretty good to get as much of the water out as possible. Run them on wax paper. Put another piece of wax paper between them, and do two and run 2 rows high on my tomatoes. And then I've got big round tomatoes, and I can typically get them in a jar and stack them up, so I can have tomato slices if I want to rehydrate.
Do you like them rehydrated like on a hamburger, or do they get floppy?
Well, they're going to get a little floppy, but it really depends on how well you. I think it's more on the front end. The more water you get out on the very front end, it's easier for it to do it in a reasonable time frame. It's going to get I mean, some foods have so much water, it takes a long time, and you're really, do you really want to do 48-hour run on something? So I hadn't had that issue. I think it's really how ripe the tomatoes are. You know, if they're a little firm if they're not quite as ripe, they're going to be a little bit firmer. And
so the trick is harvest them on the firm side, get as much liquid out before you start the process, and then they're going to be a little less, what I'm going to call soggy.
Well, I don't know that getting I don't even know that getting the water out on the front end makes a difference, because the freeze dry is going to get it out. You just have to run it longer to get it out. I just don't like to.
Well, and it's the seeds, right? The seeds hold so I can tell you about some freeze dryer fails. And then after this, let's talk about some of our favorite things to freeze dry.
Okay.
My freeze dry fail was watermelon, where I didn't get all the seeds out, and I keep the jar to show people the difference between something that freeze dried all the way and something that didn't when I'm doing an orientation, because you can tell they've all gummed together in the jar despite the fact there's an O2 absorber in there. And that's because I did not properly assess if it was finished. And things with seeds in it, the seeds are very dense. It's hard to get the moisture out, so they take longer. Strawberries take a long time. Watermelon takes a long time. And if you don't get all the moisture out, eventually that just through osmosis uniformly will humidify whatever's in the jar, right? So it's like partially reconstituted and ends up weird and gummy. So this jar, if you shake it, it's just like a solid block. And then my other jar is one I did all the way, and they shake around like watermelon chips, basically.
Did you notice how much longer it took to make it go all the way and finish up? Was it like
no? That was from the same batch. I had one tray where they were cut a little bit thicker, and there were some seeds in it. I had another tray where I got all the seeds out. With tomatoes, I've heard they take less time if you get all the seeds out. And when you have something with seeds, like I'm shameless when I'm not sure. I'm like, 12 more hours of drying time at the end, because I want to make sure this is really dry if it's something I'm worried about.
Well, I've got to that point too. It's really more about convenience to me, about when I can process the food. Like if it finishes up early in the morning and I got to I've got my milk run today.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go in there and put more dry time and run it up 10 or 12 hours. And then I'll come back and it's still running. And if I've got time to fool with it, I'll go cut it off and process it. It ain't going to hurt it. It's just going to make it drier.
Yeah.
And I literally, during my wife's campaign, I had duck eggs in there freeze drying, and I had it. I guess they sat in there for like 2 weeks. I just kept pouring dry. I don't have time for. I don't have
the most expensive duck eggs ever dehydrated in history are now at Jake's house.
Yeah. So I'm turning red on that too. So it's that time. But when I don't have time, it's no big deal. You just run up the time, and if you want to, I mean, if it's going to sit there with the freezer running, I just assume for it to be drying. Because if you don't open your freeze dry at the end of the cycle, this freezer is going to continue to keep it cold.
Yeah,
and it's going to keep a vacuum on it. and then so I just put some more dry time and come back in and knock it out.
That's where I am with my road food right now. It's literally been done for 2.5 hours now because it got done right as I started my John Willis Tuesday live, and it was probably an hour past due, but usually right before a live stream, I'm making sure coffee stuff is under control and that sort of thing. And I was like, well, I'll just add 8 hours, and when I'm done with Jake, I'll take it out and bag it. And the worst case, if it wasn't quite done all the way, because when you pull it out, you can touch it with your hand. I actually put a glove on my hand so I don't get hand oils in there. And if it feels cold at all, you got to keep drying it. So
that's the key right there. And I didn't know that early on because I probably did some meat, one of my deli meats, where it felt cold to the touch, like ice. Maybe it had ice in it. Maybe that's what it was. The moisture is cold, and now, it's got to be super dry. It can't be cold. Can't be sticky. If it feels a little sticky, then it's probably not done. I hadn't had many fails like that. I've never had a fail coming straight out of it. I just had where I just went ahead and processed it too soon, and every now and then I get a lid failure. Do you ever have? Do you?
Oh yeah. So lid in particular, when I try to store basil in jars, those lids fail. Really? And I don't know if it's like a little bit of powder gets under the lid or something. And so I have just started putting those in Mylar, or I'll use clear plastic too if I'm going to use it. So
are you using all wide mouth?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah.
I never will use regular. If you guys are thinking about doing freeze drying, just save yourself time. Don't even buy the attachment that freeze dries that does regular size jars, because I can't get them to ever hold. I've tried and tried and tried. I'll get it to take an initial seal, but I can come back three days later and it'll be a 50-50 chance that the lid is just not even sealed at all.
Yeah, and, I for me, if it's powdery, it's a problem. But I store most things default storage in mason jars, vacuum sealed. I have a chamber vac sealer, so I can do up to a quart in that. So, and if I needed to do half gallons, you can put that in your freeze dryer, as I talked about on my expert counsel segment for Jack.
I'm gonna walk. I can still talk. I'm just gonna grab something and show you guys, because I think people need to see this, because they're like, how do you seal your jars when you were saying you can put it into the freeze dryer and use the chamber itself, which you can. But I find if you have a really good vacuum sealer that has an attachment,
that's probably, is that a Harvest? What's it called? What's the brand on yours?
Well, I got it from Webstront.
Okay, so it's not a Food Saver.
No, it's not a Food Saver. It's the one I think Jack has. It's stainless steel, 16 inches wide, and it's about $300. If you catch it on sale, you can find it a little bit below 300. At least you could. But it has a little port on the side of the freeze dryer, so you can it has a bag roll, so you can roll out your bag and cut it the length you want. So if you're doing some ribs or whatever.
You mean your vacuum sealer, not your freeze dryer?
Your vacuum sealer.
Yeah.
So this plugs into the side of the vacuum sealer, and there's a separate button that says accessory, and you just pop that right on, and then hit accessory, and it seals it right on. Now this is for wide mouth. They've got one smaller. Don't get the small one. Don't fool with regular size jars. So just save yourself the headaches. Always go with wide mouth, and you will have a lot less problems trying to get your stuff to seal.
Yeah, I just go with wide mouth because it's easier to pack them.
That's true too. It's easier to get food in there. So
okay, so what are your favorite foods to freeze dry?
I like dense calorie foods. I like meat. I don't like to do Skittles and gummy bears and all that. And I know you had success with it, and it actually piqued my curiosity, because it sounds like you're making some bucks on that.
You can make bucks on that, yeah.
So like cheese. I found I don't know if you guys we have a store called oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the store. It's a closeout store. It's a grocery store, kind of like Big Lots, but it's for grocery stores. And they have 5-pound bags of all types of cheese. And of course, I didn't know if the cheese would taste good. I bought one bag of it and tasted it. I said, "Oh, this is real cheese. It's not cheese food." And so this is shredded cheddar cheese, and I've got Monterey Jack and a whole bunch of others. So I like stuff that is calorie dense. I don't do a lot of veggies, but when I have vegetables from my garden, like I've got zucchini and squash over here, but I want stuff that that has got some calories and got some oomph to it. I also do raw milk. And this is wait a minute. This is eggs. This is egg powder, and I did that. What does that say? June of 2020.
Yeah, you're very, very ambitious about how good my eyes are to read something that small.
Oh, you can't read that?
My computer screen's only this big.
Okay.
Yeah.
I bet the people online can see it.
Why do you think I'm asking everybody to ask questions in all caps? It's because I am streaming this over a laptop, although soon I will have my webcam set up in here. It'll be a little bit different. And so it's the smallest screen because I don't like carrying a heavy laptop around.
I can see you real well because I got a Mac.
Yeah, your video screen is 2 inches by whatever. You know, it's actually 2 inches by 4 whatever, 4.9.
So I do raw milk. I belong to a raw milk co-op, and so I'm keto, carnivore. I don't hardly drink any milk, but when I buy a gallon a week, and I want to be a part of that group. I could have bailed out, a year ago when I went keto, or maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. But I wanted to stay plugged in because it's a Mennonite farm that offers raw milk. And even if I don't drink it or need it, I felt like when the world stops and you can't get milk, or milk goes, to $5 a gallon or something, or $10 a gallon for the stuff you get at the store, where I can get raw milk fresh from a cow, and I can turn it into milk powder, and then I can use that if I wanted to. And this is powdered milk. So powdered milk can go a long way. I can barter that. And actually I am bartering that right now. So what I normally do is I take my gallon of milk, and it's heavy cream, about a third, about the top 25%. I take that cream off of it, and I make butter. And the butter, I freeze it in jars and just leave it in the freezer, and I use it on a regular basis. I don't know how long the butter will last in the freezer, but I don't make enough butter that I can't go through it. It's not like 25-year butter. And but the rest of it, I'll make it, and I'll freeze dry it, make it into milk powder, and put it in a blender and throw it in a jar. Now, I used to have this couple that had lots of eggs. They had chicken eggs. When COVID hit and they shut down the world, they had 60 dozen eggs a week that they were trying to get rid of because they were selling to restaurants. All the restaurants shut down. And so I contacted them and said, "Hey, would you guys be willing to let me freeze dry some of your eggs?" And they didn't know what freeze drying was. So I had to educate them, give them a jar of freeze dried eggs, and show them how, look, not only is this a way for you to do something with your eggs besides just feed them to the dogs, because they were trying to sell them on next door and they just weren't selling enough. We made a deal. They gave me 60 eggs a week. I gave them 25% of the eggs back. So I gave them 15 eggs. I kept 45. So basically I was giving them, I was making them into egg chunks, not egg powder at that point. So they were getting one jar. I was getting 3. But I gave them the idea that, look, you're getting some of your eggs back that you can put on the shelf that'll last for 5 years or 10 years or 25 years. If your chickens quit laying, or avian flu comes through and wipes them out, or a fox gets in your hen house, or during the wintertime when they stop laying, you've got eggs put up that you can use anytime you want. And they really like that idea. So I did that for a full summer, and every week I was putting up 45 eggs on my shelf. And then they did get a fox in their hen house. They got some kind of predator, and all of their chickens quit laying, and they wanted to wait. And then the winter came, and then we just fell out of contact. I don't think they just wanted to get started back up. But then right up the street, this couple started advertising chicken and duck eggs. So I know them, but I didn't know them that well. And I got to talking to them. I said, "Hey, look, would you be willing talking about freeze dry and whatnot. And she was like, wow, I would love some milk powder because I want to start baking, and it would be nice to have milk, milk powder. And so we made a deal that I give her 1 gallon of milk. She gives me 2 dozen duck eggs. And at first I was doing it, but I can't eat 2 dozen duck eggs in a day or two. It takes me a week or two to eat them. And I thought, well, this is crazy. I got a freeze dryer. And so I said, I tell you what, how about I just bring you a gallon of milk every week, freeze dry? That's a gallon of milk right there.
Right, it fits in the quart jar.
Yeah. And so how about I bring you a gallon of milk each week, and you give me two dozen duck eggs, and then I freeze dry the duck eggs. I've got duck eggs in the freezer right now.
Yeah.
And so now
apparently you freeze dried some for 2 weeks.
Yes, I did. That was my first batch.
Here's a question for you. So we served my freeze-dried duck eggs at the spring workshop when we ran out of fresh eggs, and we got purple spots in some of them. And I'm thinking it may be because I added salt and pepper, that the pepper, when it freeze-dried, released color. Yeah.
Probably did. I would imagine so. Yeah, I never pre-season any of my food. Like the beef, yeah. I don't pre-season at all. There's nothing in it. Because I want to be able to pre-season. I want to be able to season. Like if I'm making chili, I'm gonna put chili powder in it and some other stuff. I'm making, spaghetti. I might put salt and some other stuff and garlic salt in there. So I don't typically do that. I tend to do individual foods, like ingredients. And I have a buddy of mine here that lives in this area. And by the way, I'm only about an hour away from Nicole. I'm over in the Murfreesboro area. He does nothing but prepared meals. He don't do any individual ingredients. So he's got like, chili and stew and all these and casseroles and all kind of stuff. That's my next move that I want to go to, because I've got a double door, reach in 43-foot stainless steel freezer. It's like basically a commercial freezer. I've got it full of both butcher box and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And so what I want to do is start taking some of the chicken that I get the chicken wings and the drumsticks every month in butcher box. I don't eat all that. So I'm gonna take that and turn it into some type of, put it in the crock pot, cook it down, make some kind of something or another. I would rather.
I've been doing that with any leftovers I have, and the thing I've learned to do is leftovers of the same flavor profile. You can have different things per shelf, but if I have a really garlicky thing with something that's not supposed to be garlicky at all, there's a little bit of, in the same batch, they'll be passed through flavors.
Oh, right.
So like I'll do chili, salsa, and beef stew together, because that doesn't bother me to have some crossover, because there's not a lot. But that's what I did last year, Jake, when I had extra time. I would just freeze leftovers in the appropriate shape for the freeze dryer, and then I just freeze dried whole meals. And what I didn't realize is I used those all up by now, so I'm now starting over. I had one serving of one thing left. That's all I had when I was like, oh, I'm going out of town.
Well, I have done some leftovers. We had a campaign event where we did barbecue. We had a lot of barbecue leftover. I went ahead and freeze dried it and put it in a jar. I also we did a big thing of stew where we canned a bunch of it for my daughter and my son-in-law. We did a bunch of canned stuff, and then I freeze dried a bunch of it. And then I reconstituted it and checked it out, and it is pretty dang good. So I want to do more of the casserole stews and something that special on that kind of stuff. I might pack that in Mylar. And the reason I might do that is that on a stew or something like that, where you can eat it with a spoon, is you can clip the top of your Mylar bag and just turn your tap water up as hot as you can get it, and pour a little, or take, well, actually I take Berkey water and put it in my kettle.
Yeah.
You just pour it straight into you stand it up in your sink and lean it against the wall and pour the boiling hot water into it. And about 3 minutes later, you're ready. You can eat it right out of the bag or dump it in a bowl.
Yeah.
And so it depends on, what situation you're in. Are you in a bug out situation where you don't have a lot of cleaning way to clean things, and you can make hot water and eat right out of your Mylar. Only thing
Okay,
about
well,
Mylar,
that segues into the next question here, which is what foods are better canned versus freeze dried, in your opinion?
well, I mean, I like tomato juice, and so I don't think I would make tomato juice from freeze dried stuff. I mean, I can that stuff. I want to just open it up and drink it.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know that there's some foods that if you can it, you can just heat it up and eat it because it's in its own juice. Okay. But if you freeze dry it and then rehydrate it, a lot of foods won't rehydrate with the same texture profile that you're accustomed to, and you're not going to like it. Bananas, you're not going to rehydrate to banana, but banana chips, freeze dried bananas are awesome if you want
Yeah.
to eat something sweet, or maybe strawberries the same way. So certain foods are not. You're going to have to test that and see. Or you could go to my favorite resource is a Facebook group called Betty's Harvest Right Freeze Dryer Group, and there's a search bar on the side. I don't care what you think you want to freeze dry. Somebody's already tried it about 17 different ways with all types of failures and hacks and successes, and here's how to do it best. And so that would be where you'd go to learn about how do I do blueberries. You need to slice them open or whatever. There's different techniques, and there is some controversy. Like pork chops. That's a fatty food. You're not supposed to be able to freeze dry fat. Fat will go rancid. I will say you can freeze dry them as long as you don't try to save them for 25 years. You can probably get away with freeze drying something if you'll eat it within 6 months. I've done some pork chops. I've done
Yeah,
pork
I've
chops.
heard pork chops are great. And my theory on that is like if you're going on a road trip and you want to be able to cook pork chops, you can freeze dry those puppies and you're going to eat them within 2 weeks or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
and just rehydrate them and cook them, and then you don't have to bring the cooler. And
exactly.
that's kind of cool. That's what I'm doing right now is I don't have to bring the cooler. Yay. The only thing I didn't get done were hamburger patties.
So again, what is the best food? What's better? Turns out better canned than freeze dried. I can't say that because I've actually almost 100% abandoned canning food. I still got my canners. I don't know, never know. Two is one, one is none. But I don't even want to can anymore because it's to me uh, you're going to spend about the same amount of time as on prepping food. In freeze drying, your work is really prepping the food to go into the freeze dryer and then process it when it comes out. Certain prepping, like eggs, for example, I have a method to do that. I've got a KitchenAid mixer, and I'll crack 15 eggs, either chicken eggs or 15 duck eggs will fit in a tray easily. Maybe get 20, but I do 15 duck eggs or 15 chicken eggs into a bowl and mix it on low. And I've got two bowls, extra bowls. So while it's mixing, I'm making scrambled eggs basically. I'm breaking the next batch of eggs into the other bowl. And then when I'm done breaking those, my first batch is already ready. It's all mixed up. I walk over to the freezer, and I've got I use, if you have enough room, I don't know if you can see this, Nicole, but that is a tray holder. It's got 3 slots, so you put one tray in each slot and then one on top. So it'll hold 4 trays in your freezer. That way you can load food into it and not have to worry about it spilling. So it's sitting in my freezer, and then I'm putting I just I just pull the tray out, pour my eggs in here, and then in about 20 minutes to run a full load of eggs that way. And then I like to pre-freeze all my food because what I like to do is stage. If you want to keep your freeze dryer running 24/7, it's better to have food pre-frozen because that's the first thing your freeze dryer is going to do. It's going to freeze your food to about -30 to -70 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's okay if you can get a good start on it. If you have your eggs pre-frozen and it's frozen at -4 in your freezer, and you put it in the freeze dryer, technically you could customize your time because it's going to automatically default to like 9 hours, I think it is. to freeze dry and to go into the freeze mode. If you're already at -4 and it's solid frozen, you don't have to. It's not having to cool it down.
Yeah, and the newer ones,
can,
Jake, that it's not that they
automatic.
they sense. Yeah, it's so your times will change. That happened to me because I ran something through twice, and the second batch was like 12 hours done because I had a power outage and had to deal with it. And I was like, I'll just do the whole cycle all over rather than figure out where it was in the cycle.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine that just bought a new Harvest Right, not the oilless. A freeze dryer has your main thing. It looks like the size of a mini fridge, and it's a big cylinder, and it holds your trays. But you also have a vacuum pump that's connected to it next door that runs and takes it through the sublimation process. So your freezer kicks in first, runs for about 9 hours, and then or less depending on if it's computerized. I have an older version. It does have it has a board on it, and it has some computerized. It's able to tell when it's dried, but some people will go in there and customize and run their time down to 7 hours, and they're saving a couple of hours, and maybe overall they can get more turns on their unit. I will say that the new machine that I saw, I helped set this lady's machine up, and that the way the community works in the Harvest Right freeze dry, there's a lot of input from people who use their machines. They use them, they're teaching Harvest Right some tricks, and Harvest Right is learning from their users. Oh wow, they've discovered this, and one of the things they discovered was how people. You mentioned that you wanted to be able to recycle your oil, and so some wise guy out there came up with take a Brita water filter. This one's broke, by the way, and take the filter that comes with it out, and then take Scott single ply toilet paper and cut enough of it off and turn it into a roll, and I don't know if you can see that, but you just basically stuff it down in there. That's toilet paper. And that toilet paper right there has filtered a year's worth of oil, and so about every 24 to 36 hours, I'm opening up the drain pit, the drain cock from the vacuum pump, from the vacuum pump, and pour it out, and it fills up to the top, and then it takes about, I don't know, probably takes a whole day because I don't care, because I've got a big gallon jug of vacuum pump oil, so I fill up the vacuum pump and start a new and then this is filtering, and eventually it fills up, and then I pour that into an empty quart jar, and I put it in the freezer, and I let it freeze, and the oil's not going to freeze solid. It's going to get super cold. The oil, gets a lot, the viscosity gets a lot thicker, but the water in the oil will seep to the bottom and freeze to the bottom of the jar. So once you do that, you're ready. Once you've done that for a good 24, 36 hours, then you can take that jar of molasses oil, pour it back into your jug that you store your oil in, and the ice is still on the bottom of the jar. So you separate your water from your oil, and then you can recycle your oil almost forever. I literally have been I've been recycling, and you're going to lose oil because sometimes you drop it and break it and get oil all over your floor. That was a catastrophe. But
well, the other thing is, if you're a super taster, which I am, what I have found is that I have oil for milk and eggs, and I have oil for chili and spicy stuff. And
so you're like super anal about your oil.
I am. I'm weird about it, but that's because I taste things and I smell things other people can't taste and smell. And my candy oil is candy oil.
Okay, I get that. That makes a lot of sense. And if you got enough oil, you can do that.
Yeah, and I have I don't know. I ended up with 6 gallons or 8 gallons of oil when we bought this freeze dryer from somebody that needs refurbishing. It came with 6 or 8 gallons of oil. I was like, I'll just label the jar, and that is what it is, and it works great.
I don't think I worry about that. Maybe maybe I had COVID. Maybe I can't taste anything anymore.
No,
I don't know.
I can taste things other people can't taste. That's why I roast coffee well. It's because I can smell things people
Right.
can't smell. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But the new machines, the new no, they do have one that's called an oilless vacuum
Yeah.
pump, has no oil. But they're super expensive. They're like $1,500 just for the vacuum pump. I don't think I'd ever spend that much money on a
You can
pump.
buy an aftermarket oilless pump for like somebody told me $400 or $500
Maybe,
if you
yeah.
care.
It just
For
yeah.
me, it's I have what I have, and it takes 5 minutes to do an oil change, and I don't care. It all works.
Well,
What are your function stacking ideas for freeze dryer?
let me go back to that new pump though. The new pump that they have now, that's called the Premier pump. It's not oilless, but it's way better engineered than mine. You
Yeah, I use
literally,
that one.
okay, the manual says you can get like 20 or maybe 25 cycles of oil through it before you have to change it. So if you're not like
Unless you
super
are
sensitive,
freeze drying wet, weird stuff like milk and eggs, and then it goes 15 for me.
excuse me. I'm just trying to save you guys from at least the visual of
Excuse
that.
me.
Your dogs are barking. So yeah, so the newer pumps, you can get away, if you're not a super sniffer like Nicole is, you could get away with 20 to 25 cycles without changing your oil. I change my oil every
They say
single
up to
cycle.
50 on that thing, and I could see it if you're doing well prepared stuff that's not going to be messy. I think
Yeah.
you can get 50. I could get they had a pump that could do 5, and I have that pump too. And then I did a batch of Reese's Pieces, and don't do Reese's Pieces. That's my lesson learned there. I melted some Reese's Pieces, but they have too much fat, so it just melted. And then I realized my neighbor is allergic to peanuts.
Oh my gosh.
And so if he's going to eat anything from my freeze dryer, I had to do a deep clean, pull the pump apart, and I had the Premier pump too. So I just cleaned it deeply, put the Premier pump on, and it's fine. And eventually I'll get into that other pump. But I have 2 pumps, so if one breaks, I'm not totally screwed.
Well, I
So
did have a pump that did break, and it started leaking oil, and it was
yeah.
a rear main seal. And fortunately, the same guy that I mentioned. Did you ever find Will This Freeze Dry?
What I found were a bunch of different people. So just keep talking.
Okay, so anyway, he had a video on exactly how to take your pump down. Showed you the parts to order, and I ordered the parts and did it myself and basically fixed it. But I still think I have a small leak. But in the big scheme of things, it can be rebuilt. But when you break it down, it's not that difficult. It's just like anything else. You break it down and you got to clean it. And so, I don't think I have an issue. I do want to have a backup, but I don't have a backup right this minute. I think I could probably get one from Harbor Freight in a pinch if I had I need to, I can't. Maybe it's going to take 6 weeks to get another one shipped to me. I could probably use one of their off-the-shelf units and maybe kill it over 6 weeks. So anyway.
Yeah, and as I said, they have aftermarket options that I've seen people doing. I'm not getting anything for Will This Freeze Dry. So
yeah, I'm not seeing my guy here. It's
retired at 40. He's done a lot of that. And that's one of my favoritist YouTube channels. So he does a lot.
He's newer to freeze dry than this other guy. This other guy's starts with an E. I can't remember his name now, but it's a fantastic channel because
Epicenter Brian.
Epicenter Brian, that's it.
Yep.
He's got a video on how to reboot your pump, but you got to have the particular pump he's got. The newer pumps, I don't think you're going to do any of that stuff. The newer pump, like the Premier pump, it's so well made, and even now, what surprised me is it came. Harvest Right sent her a Brita water filter that said Harvest Right oil filter on it.
Yeah.
And they've already got I guess they've got a design filter made for oil, and it really is just a Brita water filter. But I didn't
And the
realize
toilet paper roll works better than that filter still.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. That I know. But
Okay.
you just
Well,
can't beat the toilet paper filter. It is. Okay. So we're getting on an hour here. It's about time to wrap up. If people want to like find you and all of that, or ask more questions or interact with you, how do they do that?
I am on Telegram, and I'm in your group. I'm in the alumni group and the TSP group, a bunch of other groups. I'm on Facebook. I don't spend a lot of time on there. Usually, the only time I'm on Facebook is when somebody has posted a, like a group. It's usually in a group, private group. But I am on there. I don't do Twitter. I don't do that other stuff. But you can email me if you want, Jake Robinson RVP at Gmail. Also, were you able to bring up? Are you able to bring up the spreadsheet at all? I have
Yes.
a spreadsheet, guys. And if Nicole wants to make it available, I bought that second freeze dryer, and the guy that I bought it from, he had this spreadsheet right here. You might not be able to see it, but it has every single cycle that he ever ran through that machine. It was 52 cycles. He has trays 1, 2, 3, and 4. So he says, like, I've got peas on tray 1. I had ice cream sandwiches on trays 2 and 3, and on corn on tray 4. And then it shows you that he spent 12 hours in the freeze time and 12 hours in the dry time, and a total of 30 hours. It has the cost for the total kilowatt hours, and then the cost of that cycle was $2.42, or was that $3? I can't read it from here, it's small. But it actually has the cost of every single one. And if you notice, the most expensive one on the list is eggs at around $3.74. Keep in mind, that's just for running the machine. I think you said you ran a cost of about $8, but that was probably for your time and labor and oil and all that other stuff.
It was sorry, there's my email, everybody. It was I included some depreciation of the machine because I was trying to figure out how much to rent it for. I did an electricity calculation, and then the oil. When I did my original calculation, I thought every 5 loads I'd have to completely change the oil because I didn't know I could filter it. And that like filtering the oil is a game changer on cost.
Yeah, because you'll buy the oil one time and spend $30 to $50 for a good gallon of oil.
Yeah.
That gallon of oil should last you almost a year at least if you don't spill it. But that spreadsheet shows you that almost any cycle you do, it's going to cost you between $2 to less than $4 to do a load of food. So when you figure the cost of your food, and if you can buy in bulk or buy, when there's a big sale on something, that's when you stock up on it. Like that cheese. I went in and bought like 10 bags of 5-pound bags of cheese, put it in my freezer, and then I got on the cheese mode for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and I cleared all the cheese out and put them on the shelf. So it's just a mindset of what can I put on my shelf next. And of course, it can be a lot like Nicole is, how much, are you going to eat it along the way? And I've got enough food now that if Armageddon comes or the zombie apocalypse, I think I'm going to be good for probably a couple of years, depending on how many of my relatives show up. But at the same time, I can also know that long term, I can wake up 10 years from now and pull something off the shelf, and it'll be good edible food that I know how it came, where it came from, and I handled it.
And what's your website if people want to like get involved with you in real estate?
I buy land, BUY land. That's one of the things that I've been moderately successful at, is buying and flipping raw land, and that's kind of where my bread and butter comes from. I still do some financial services work for my clients that I have on board, but I'm not really bringing new clients on board. Buybyland.com, or just email me, and you can put that in the notes. But do you want to have a download for the spreadsheet? You're welcome to do that. It'll give you some insight on what you're looking at on different types of food.
That spreadsheet's super helpful. I'll throw it up in the membership portal for people to download, or they can email me and we'll shoot it over to them.
He did do gummy bears and marshmallows. I did notice that, and ice cream sandwiches. So
gummy bears apparently are really good. I don't know. I haven't done them. So, Well, Jake, thanks so much for being on today. And guys, we'll be back with another live stream Friday this week, as long as I get internet connection in Bastrop, Texas. I'm heading out tomorrow with my freeze-dried bag of tricks. I'll report back how it went existing off freeze-dried food for a little over a week.
Thanks for having me on,
Jake.
Nicole.
Yeah.
Have a good trip in Texas and be safe.
Yeah, will do.